pancakes are a pretty classic appetizer that you could find at State Bird Provisions. Stuart Brioza said he was inspired by Korean kimchi pancakes, and he wanted to make a pancake specifically for this restaurant. What makes this special is the secret ingredient, which is sourdough starter. We'll talk more about that later. I found this recipe on sfgate.com. It was one of the few recipes available pre-cookbook release. I'll place the link below. First step is the batter. This is the same base for all the pancakes. Start with 1.5 cups all-purpose flour, half a teaspoon of baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons kosher salt, and mix it all together so everything is evenly distributed. Once you're done mixing, add 1 beaten egg. As you can see, I'm doing everything by hand because I don't have a mixer. If you happen to have a mixer, this will go by faster, so please feel free to use it. I'm just mixing the egg into the flour a little bit more. It's okay if it gets crumbly. Once you're done mixing that in, add 3/4 cup of water. You will notice that the dough is quite lumpy and thick. This is how it's supposed to look. It's supposed to be lumpy and thick. Once you add in the sourdough starter, that should break down some of the starch and make it a lot smoother. You can see that my whisk got stuck and filled with dough. I would recommend using the whisk only when you are trying to mix the dry ingredients. So the next step is adding 1/2 cup of sourdough starter. You don't need to use sourdough starter, but I think it adds a lot of depth and flavor. This is just a starter that I've had for months now. It looks a little low because I baked bread earlier. If you don't have sourdough starter, you can get it from your local bakery, or you can go on theperfectloaf.com, which has a great guide for making your own sourdough starter. I forgot to record mixing the sourdough starter into the dough, but this is what it looks like afterwards. It should be thick, so it gives the pancake a lot of body. What you want to do now is cover this and put it in the refrigerator for 24 hours for the flavors to deepen. Letting it sit will also allow the sourdough starter to break down the clumps of starch. And this is what it looks like the next day. You can see that the dough looks a lot smoother. Some parts of it have dried out a little bit, but that's nothing to worry about. You're just going to mix that back into the batter. Now that the base is done, we can add all our other yummy ingredients. First ingredient is 1/2 cup of sauerkraut. You can find this in most grocery stores. And just stir it in. You'll notice that the dough is quite sticky, but really satisfying to stir as well. Next is 2 ounces of pecorino romano. The recipe specifically says to not finely grate this and to have crumbs instead. I created crumbs by just running a knife through 2 ounces of pecorino romano and created this texture. Mix this part pretty well because you want the cheese evenly distributed. At this point, you want to add enough freshly cracked black pepper to taste. I'm adding a pretty liberal amount because I like things to be peppery. Once the pepper is stirred in, you can just set it aside. So these pancakes are cooked in ghee. This is what I made earlier. Another name for it is clarified butter. Basically, you melt butter, you skim off the proteins and boil off the water, and this is what's left. It has a pretty high smoke point and adds a lot of flavor to the pancakes. If you don't feel like making this, you can buy this as ghee, G-H-E-E, in grocery stores. Add enough of the clarified butter to coat the bottom part of a pan. And you want to wait till the butter starts to smoke a little bit. I don't know if you can see it in the corner, but I do see some smoke. At this point, add a heaping tablespoon of the batter. I'm just doing a few at a time, that way I have better control. I didn't want any of them to burn while I was waiting for others to cook. If you look at the very edges that are cooking, you can see that they brown pretty quickly. The moment you finish putting the little pancakes in, scoop in 1 heaping teaspoon of ricotta and press it down slightly. Ricotta does have a lot of water in it, so you might see that the edges of the ricotta will burn slightly, but that's not a problem. It will still taste good. You want this to cook until the edges are just golden brown. The moment that it's golden brown, flip them over. The recipe says to make sure that you cook this 85% on one side and then quickly flip it over and let that cook until the edges are golden. So golden brown, but not burnt. You can see all the water splattering around. That's from the ricotta. Don't worry about that. I just wanted to show you what the pancakes look like once they're cooked. You can see there's some height and some body to it. You're going to wonder if something this thick will cook all the way through, and it will. You can see there's a slight ring around the ricotta, but I warned you about that already. So you can serve this family style in a gigantic plate, and it looks pretty attractive. Just sprinkled some salt. Or you can do it state bird style and serve it on a piece of wood, sprinkle some caraway seeds on this, and of course some salt. In the restaurant, if you order these pancakes, there's this kind of rye flavored salt that comes with the pancakes. This wasn't in the sfgate.com recipe, but once the cookbook is released, I'll make a separate video detailing how to make that salt. If you try making these amazing pancakes, please let me know how it goes. If you have any tips or comments for me, please let me know as well. I'm always willing to learn. Thank you for watching.